I just found out that my childhood friend, Sachi, has managed to stay alive to this day with the help of something incredible. We're both females in our 30s. We're not from small towns where our families have been friends for generations. In fact, we're both city girls, born and raised. Neither of us have really been into ghosts or the paranormal other than the occasional scary stories. Sachi's the type of person who forgets about bad things that happened only a day ago. She was positive like that. I remember getting irritated sometimes when we were younger because we'd get into a fight and she would come over the next day as if nothing happened while I was still mad at her. She also has several quirks that she abides by, like never getting out of bed in the middle of the night and stopping to pray every time she walks past a Buddha. Those are just a couple that I know of, but apparently she has more. So, I've been using a dating app and I happen to match with a monk. Isn't it funny that even they use dating apps too? I know they usually practice celibacy, but in Japan, they aren't monks 24/7 and are allowed to marry and have a family. On our second or third date, I started talking to him about Sachi and showed him a photo that the two of us took together when we went to see the Kegon waterfalls in Nikko, Tochigi Prefecture. Nikko is well known for its numerous waterfalls, and Kegon is the most famous one of them all, reaching a height of 97 meters. When I showed him the picture, he said in such a loud voice that people sitting around us at the cafe turned to look at us. "Is she still alive?" I didn't appreciate that question. Sachi is my precious friend, and for him to ask such an insensitive question annoyed me, and my feelings must have been blatantly obvious because he apologized and explained. I can't perform exorcisms, and I'm not as spiritual as some others, but I can feel and see things. He looked at the photo again and told me in a quieter voice that multiple pale hands were pulling on both of Sachi's arms backwards into the waterfall, that he could barely see her arms. Sachi was holding up her usual double peace signs, and he could see her hands and her wrists, but from her shoulder down, all he could see were hands grabbing and pulling at her. Hands that weren't of this world. To me, the picture looked normal. I even had it up on Instagram, so I obviously didn't believe him. He continued, "Wow, I've never seen something like this so clearly before. People have shown me pictures where I thought that there might have been something else captured in it, but never to this level." I was honestly a bit pissed off by what he was saying, but from our past dates, I knew that he was a thoughtful and quiet person, and he was also a gentleman. I didn't think he was the type to lie about something like this. I also couldn't think of a reason why he would make up such lies, unless it was some twisted way for him to get rid of me. We were supposed to go to dinner that day, but things got a bit awkward after that conversation, and we ended the date early and eventually stopped communicating. After I got home, I contacted Sachi just in case to see how she was doing. She was on a mini getaway with her boyfriend and clearly didn't seem to be possessed by anything evil. Here I was trying to find a man through dating apps while she was prancing around with her boyfriend. How unfair, I thought. This all happened last year, and a few days ago, the monk contacted me out of the blue. Apparently, what he saw in the picture had been bothering him since the day he laid eyes on it, and talked to his father, a priest, about it. His father suggested for Sachi and I to go see them. "Say what now?" was all I could say. Sachi was as happy and go-lucky as ever. I never talked to her about what the monk had said, but I did talk to another mutual friend of ours. Our conclusion was that there was no way she was possessed by anything evil. In fact, she tended to be on the quite lucky side compared to the rest of us. But it wasn't every day you got to have private time with a priest, and the monk was a good-looking man. Our mutual friend told me to take Sachi as a wingwoman and use her to see him again. I told Sachi that I met a monk through a dating app and whether she would like to meet him. She sounded excited and agreed straight away. He was someone that I could see myself potentially dating, and I was still single when he called. So I looked at how much exorcisms cost, and it was affordable. I also couldn't ignore all of this in case it was true. I could never forgive myself if something happened to Sachi and she died or something. A few days ago, we finally went to go see them at their temple. I told them when we would be arriving, but when we saw that we were ahead of time and saw how big the temple was, we decided to look around a bit to not put them out. As we stepped into the property though, the priest appeared out of nowhere and welcomed us. He was bald, but he was quite a handsome old man. He led us to a door at the side of a stall that sold a bunch of amulets and good luck charms. It led into a large tatami room of about 25 square meters. There was nothing other than a low table and some floor chairs. The monk brought in some Japanese tea and sweets. Sachi and I sat across from the two of them, and as I was wondering how to start the conversation, Sachi spoke up. She told them that she assumed they would speak briefly outside and wasn't expecting to have a proper sit-down meeting like this, and apologized for showing up empty-handed. Thanks to her, the conversation slowly picked up from there. After a while, Sachi started talking about how she liked to travel around and visited Kyoto not long ago. The monk perked up and asked, "Where in Kyoto did you go?" "Oh, well, I rented out a kimono and went all over the place," she replied, taking her phone out and showing them a particular picture she'd taken while she was there. The faces of the father and son duo froze. It was one she'd uploaded to Instagram, and again, I didn't see anything wrong with it. "It's beautiful. Is that Kibune Shrine?" "Yes, it is," Sachi replied. "It was really hard to go up and down the stairs wearing a geta." She hadn't noticed that the priest and the monk had both turned blue. To my surprise, though, they didn't say anything to Sachi, and the conversation trudged along. She even went as far as to ask whether they had any scary stories for her, considering the line of work they were in. I thought we would end that meeting with a light form of exorcism, but the day came to an end without that either. I left with a huge question mark hanging over my head as Sachi, clueless to the reality surrounding her well-being, said, "He seemed like a really good guy. Kind of a downer he's bald, but I guess it's actually better than seeing him going through the process of becoming bald." That night, I got a call from the monk. He wanted to ask me about Sachi, not about her personal details, but more about her past experiences. The things he asked were so detailed and exact that it made me wonder if he was a fortune teller on top of everything else. One thing he asked was whether Sachi had been in any dangerous situations, but miraculously came out unscathed. I could think of not one, but several times something like that occurred. When we were in elementary school, I bumped into Sachi on my way to cram school. Some older man was talking to her, and I could tell straight away that he was some kind of creep, so I ran over to her. The man walked away as I approached, and when I asked her if she knew him, she replied, "Nope, don't know him." She seemed clueless to the potential danger she was just in. To this day, it makes me shiver just thinking about it. I remember Sachi's mum bought me a very expensive and delicious cake to thank me. She also did a semester abroad in the US when she was at uni a few years ago. There was a shooting in a high school close to her campus while she was there. Luckily, nothing happened to her, but I remember her saying it was pretty scary. As I mentioned at the start, no matter what happened around her, Sachi was the type of person who would almost forget it ever happened by the next day and continue carrying on with her life. I explained that to the monk too, and he just said, "That's fine." Wanting to understand what he meant by that, I asked him. Not concerned about whether I will believe him or not, he told me the following. There was a very, very strong shugore protecting Sachi. A side note here, a shugore is a spirit or entity that protects an individual, what you would call a guardian spirit or a guardian angel in the Western world. I will use the terms interchangeably. Now, not even the priest could determine who this spirit used to be and why it was protecting Sachi, but he surmises that it's there because Sachi provided a comfortable place for it. The reason for her good luck and the numerous times she escaped danger is probably due to the guardian spirit. Things that would otherwise injure or even kill an individual, Sachi has been getting out of unhurt. Considering she's able to attract such a powerful guardian angel, it's a no-brainer that other spirits, both good and bad, are also attracted to her. But they're all bounced off by the guardian angel, and that's why Sachi hasn't been possessed by any of the spirits that were trying to grab onto her at the waterfall. As for the picture taken at the Kibune shrine in Kyoto, both him and his father saw a woman who looked like Sadako from The Ring, wearing a shiroshozoku, or a white robe, almost trying to envelop her. The following is what the priest speculates. The many quirks that Sachi has, such as not getting out of bed in the middle of the night and praying in front of any and all Buddha statues, etc. These habits are probably what the guardian angel finds very comfortable within her, and in return, Sachi has naturally taken on new habits that she subconsciously feels from the shugore and has incorporated it into her life, thus making their relationship a mutually beneficial one. Their energies seem to match perfectly. The priest and the monk feel that the guardian angel doesn't want Sachi to know of its presence, so he asked me to keep all of this a secret from her. So, there you go. My best friend is being protected by an extremely strong guardian angel, and without its presence, it's highly likely that she would have been possessed by some evil spirit or even killed a long time ago. I'm 33, and the friend who told me this story is the same age. We've been friends since kindergarten and went to the same schools until high school. Both of us started working straight after graduation. I stayed in my hometown while my friend, let's call him Taichi, left to go work for some food production company elsewhere. About 10 years ago, he suddenly moved back. A bunch of us from our circle of friends asked him why he moved back, but he wouldn't tell us the reason at the time, and we all eventually stopped asking. I wasn't dying to know the reason, and in the end, it didn't really matter. A few days ago, we went out for some drinks, just Taichi and I, and he said out of nowhere, "Do you want to know why I decided to leave my job and that town and come back here?" "Oh yeah, you never told us the reason why. Is it something you really want to talk about?" I asked. "Well, it's been 10 years now, so I feel like I can finally tell someone." He drained the rest of his beer and began recounting the events. So our hometown is in the countryside, and Taichi moved into an equally remote area. The company was located not too far from a big city, and he was working in the marketing department. Approximately 6 months before he quit, a man in his 50s began working there. For the sake of anonymity, I'll call him Akira. He was apparently an odd person, claiming he had purposefully changed jobs periodically from the time he was young because he wanted to experience living in various places. Taichi was surprised he got hired for a new job considering his age, but Akira was a great worker. The CEO was an oddball himself, and he must have liked Akira's approach to life and agreed to hire him. As mentioned just before, Akira was a very productive worker. He said that would be his last job, and he was planning to continue traveling around Japan after retirement. But unfortunately, he was never able to realize his dreams. About a month after he began working, Taichi noticed that Akira had lost a lot of weight. His cheeks were beginning to get hollow, and his complexion was getting worse each day. Even though he was clearly going through something, his work wasn't affected one bit, which was very impressive. Taichi was sure his weight loss had nothing to do with Akira being overworked, because the company was pretty relaxed and their workload wasn't overwhelming or difficult at all. There finally came a day when Akira was too weak to come to work. When he returned after 3 days, he said that his doctor had told him that he was suffering from extreme malnutrition and he was kept for a few hours to get some IV drips. It was definitely a strange diagnosis. Yes, he was losing weight, but he was eating and drinking just like the rest of us. How could someone like that suffer from acute malnutrition? Akira was an avid runner, but his doctor told him to avoid it until he got better. It took another month for him to regain his strength, and he went straight back to running every day. It didn't take long for him to get ill, but this time it was worse than before, and he was required to get hospitalized. Everyone thought he would get better, but this time his health continued to deteriorate, and he eventually passed away. Our manager went to visit him when he was still alive, when the doctor stopped him in the hallway and asked how he knew Akira. After explaining who he was, the doctor continued talking to him about what was going on with him, because he didn't have any family and no one else had come to see him. He was back in the hospital because of malnutrition again, but it was to such an extreme level that he was in a highly dangerous situation. After Akira passed away, the doctor contacted our manager. His body was claimed by a far relative of his, but my manager was asked to take care of his belongings. He and some of Akira's friends and co-workers, Taichi included, made their way over to his apartment, which was about 1.5 kilometers from work. The company actually sublet a few units from this apartment to their employees, and Akira was one of them. The landlord was also there to help clean out the unit. I can't believe he's passed away. He was only in his 50s, right? What happened to him? He died of malnutrition, Taichi replied. Malnutrition? In this day and age? It can't be. The landlord became silent and looked a bit troubled. Taichi asked, What is it? Do you have any insights? Well, I highly doubt this has anything to do with it, but you see that forest there? Yeah, I've never gone in though, Taichi replied. That forest. There's a temple in there. The forest in question was only about 150 meters from the apartment. It was a really dense forest, so people knew about it, but Taichi never knew there was a temple inside. According to the landlord, there was a great famine a long time ago and many people died. The locals did everything they could to combat it, but nothing worked. In the end, they decided they needed help from a higher power. Everyone put their money together and called for a shaman to cure the land. The shaman stated that the land was possessed by the god of evil and that it was too strong for a human being to get rid of it. The term god of evil was the general term he used to describe this entity or energy force. In actuality, it was closer to a yokai, but because its strength was almost equal to that of a god, he described it as such. This god of evil was an embodiment of epidemics, disasters, and curses. Let me cut in real quickly and explain what a yokai is. They aren't demons in the Western sense of the word, but are instead spirits and entities, and they can be viewed as a type of god. They often have animal-like features, such as the kappa, but may also appear humanoid in appearance, such as the kuchisaki onna. Some resemble inanimate objects, while others have no discernible shape. Yokai are typically described as having spiritual or supernatural abilities, with shape-shifting being the most common trait associated with them. Now, back to the story. This god of evil was feeding off the souls of those who died from hunger and malnutrition. The shaman could not rid the land of this evil, but he could weaken it significantly. As instructed by him, the locals built a shrine to trap it into its confines. In addition, they were told to 1. Keep the shrine clean. 2. To never put your hands together in prayer or to give anything as an offering. And 3. To not let people close to it other than those who were in charge of cleaning the shrine. Once it was built, the shaman knelt before it for 3 days and 3 nights praying without rest and died due to exhaustion. After his death, the famine ended and this town began to get back on its feet, the ritual being passed down through generations and thus never being forgotten. There were stories about individuals who didn't believe in it and have put their hands together in prayer at the shrine, but they always met their death not long after. As is true with many stories that have been passed down through generations, most people think of it as just another folklore to keep the kids out of the forest, and the landlord thought the same. He had heard of it, but he couldn't say whether it was actually true or not, and aside from a few people who have lived in that town for generations, not many people even knew there was a shrine in the forest. It was true, however, that a priest from some other shrine would go in periodically to give it a clean. The landlord said, "Akira used to go running, right? I saw him running in the direction of the forest once. Maybe he prayed in front of it when he saw it, and whatever entity is trapped inside sucked his energy. I mean, malnutrition is a symptom of famine, isn't it? Or maybe I'm just getting ahead of myself. I can't prove anything of what I'm saying." Taichi, who had been listening quietly, felt something cold trickle down his back. He tried not to let it show, but his hands were shaking. When he thought back on how Akira's health declined, it made sense. When he first went to the doctor, he was told to stop running until he regained his strength. And he got better. He got better because he was most likely at home trying to recover and not going anywhere near the shrine. Once he recuperated, he probably started running his usual route through the forest, and maybe he started putting his hands together in front of it again every time he passed by. Maybe that's why whatever was trapped inside finally took his soul. Taichi couldn't stop thinking about it, and he ultimately decided to quit his job and leave that town. He didn't want to live in a place where something truly evil could be lurking just a stone's throw away from him. "I'll never go back there," he said as he ended the conversation. I'm a female, and one day I decided to Google my name. I got a few dozen hits of people who had the same name as me. Some were scientists, while others were business owners. It was strange to see people with the same name as I who were living completely separate lives. I was scrolling down when I came across a website with my name on it. It wasn't a professionally done website, so it must have been built by the individual just for fun. I looked at the information, and the person was the same age as me and had very similar hobbies too. I looked at the person's blogs and saw that she had about 5 or 6 fans who were always commenting on them. I decided to bookmark the page with the intention of popping by from time to time. After a while, I noticed that the person was beginning to blog more frequently. It wasn't anything deep or thoughtful, just everyday mundane things such as the weather, about a soccer match she watched, etc. It took me a while to realize that a lot of what she wrote coincided with my life. The first time it hit me was when I read about her going to watch a baseball game. Apparently, she was at the exact same place on the exact same day as me. Since this was the first time, I just figured it was a huge coincidence. More than 10,000 people can fit in baseball domes, so it was definitely possible. The next day, she had an entry about how she made a mistake at work. Coincidentally, I had done the same thing that day and was feeling pretty down about it. The next day, and the day after that, she would write things that mirrored my life exactly, almost to the point that it was like I was writing these entries myself. Most of the things were like, "I ate curry today," and "I bought a CD today." Things that wouldn't have meant anything if it overlapped with what I did occasionally. But it continued to overlap for several months, and it began to really creep me out. One day, I went on her website and I saw that she had celebrated her birthday that day. And you guessed it, it was my birthday too. I reached the end of my patience and finally decided to comment on her post. But try as I might, I was unable to type anything into the comment box. That's when I realized that this wasn't a blogging website. The person who created the site made it look like it was an open page where people could leave comments, but it was all fake. I got really scared and clicked on the contact page to send this person a message. The next day, when I tried to go back to see if anything new had been uploaded, the page was gone. The person had taken it down completely, but I had one unread message in my email inbox. It read, "You finally found me." There's a girl I used to go to high school with. Let's call her Reiko. We weren't very close during those days, but ever since our 10-year high school reunion, we started to hang out more often through another mutual friend of ours. At the moment, she's working as a nurse in a hospital in the city. I met up with her for some coffee one day. I don't remember what we were talking about, but the topic came to the worst thing we've ever done in our lives. I said, I think the worst thing I've ever done is steal when I was in middle school. There was a comic book I really wanted, but I didn't have enough money, so I hid it under my shirt and took it home. I felt really bad afterwards, and that shop ended up going bankrupt a few years later. It's a well-known fact that publishing companies aren't doing that well these days because of piracy and other modern-day issues. I don't think the book that I stole led to the shop going bankrupt, but it might have played a part in it. "You're bad," Reiko replied. "How about you? Have you had an affair? Or maybe bullied someone?" I asked her that because I remembered her bitching about someone behind their back in high school. She said, "Nah, I made a swap." "Huh?" I asked, not understanding what she meant. Reiko is actually an OBGYN nurse, so by making a swap, she meant she swapped 2 newborn babies with each other. "You're joking," I muttered, barely able to close my mouth in disbelief. "How could you do something like that?" She replied, laughing as if it was the greatest thing ever. "Well, I think it's fun to mess with people's fates."